All right, so I have my vector elements, my logo type flag, my catchphrase, and of course my illustration with the vector line work and the digital coloring behind it. But why is it so helpful to have these as vectors? Not only will they translate up to the right resolution no matter what the file size is, but I can also make modifications without hurting their quality. So if I want the Gotta Teach Them All to work a little bit better as a tagline with this, maybe I want to curve it a little bit more. And if I want to do that, I can open up that EPS. Here it is, my black and white text. So I'm going to open it with Illustrator. And I can take this and I can modify it directly. So generally what I will do, if it's already a text element on a path, that's very easy. You just draw a new curve. But this I've modified as outlines. So it's just like another vector. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to paste it in place so I can see the difference. And now I'm just going to play with it a little bit with the large selection tool. Just kind of stretch it down a little. And you see how that will make the curve a little more subtle? Just because it's lengthening the letters. I think it got more curved because I squeezed it together. And I'm going to try to not do that. And of course, I could do little things like in Illustrator. Rotate these big areas and just shallow them out a little bit more. Just move them into place to follow a shallower curve. Especially if I do that on the two ends. There's quite a bit of space between gotta and teach, so I have some leeway there. And then with the A itself, I keep using the wrong toolbar. I can rotate. Keep using the wrong toolbar. And I can line it up just how I think it needs to be. Maybe even shrink this A a little bit. So that's why we keep them as vectors, so they stay clean even as we modify. Because even when you have a plan and you have something you're trying to match, it very seldom works the exact way you or a client will want without any modification. That's just not how the world works. So we set up our workflow so that we can make these modifications without a ton of hassle or headache. And ultimately just make the work better and better as we go. And each of these little attributes, like finding the curve under the text and making it feel natural, it's not something a tool can do for you. You just have to kind of spot it for yourself. And obviously what matters is what looks best. I just wish Illustrator was a little bit easier in terms of how you manipulate with the mouse. So that looks pretty good. All right, so now I'm going to output that as a new EPS. So basically, it's the same name to the same place. So I'm just going to say save as, but I'll just put black white here to update it. So I always get nervous about overwriting old files. But then I want to delete this one so I don't get confused. So here's the new EPS. I go back to Photoshop, I bring that new EPS in, I place it, it's a vector file. I want the curve to be a little bit less, but I'll still squeeze it together a little bit. And place it. And then this is what I love. Because it's a vector file, I can just take all these effects from the layer before and just drag and drop them onto my new layer. So those options really help. And then I can modify my spot illustration now that I have my text in. I think I want my spot illustration to curve a little bit, angle a little bit more, be a little bit more dramatic, and maybe be a little bit smaller. Feel like he's about to perch on something. All right, so now these curves feel, they're still very triangular in composition, but they feel like they're supporting each other a little bit more. Okay, now for a background. So let me save that. I've got everything. Let's make sure I've got what I need to upload. So first thing I need to upload is just my text solutions. So let's say I messed up everything else. Well, I can duplicate my fonts, and I can change the effects to just make them solid black. Just do a color overlay, 100% of black. Then I can turn off these others and turn off the layer that it's copying. Right? So that's the black font solution. This is the first thing I want you to upload. The second one, I can just do the same thing, color overlay, just of solid black. There it is. Or I could go to open it with Illustrator, my Nicomon file, and I can just change the colors within Illustrator. Depends how necessary they are. So for instance, I can just turn all these yellow layers. It's pretty easy to color in Illustrator once everything's correct. And just turn them to a white fill. That's one layer. Turn all the blues into a black fill. This is why having things in Illustrator is so helpful. Because the quality is always perfect, always clean. And I have to do it for the layers with the other stuff. But this is also why I tend to do a lot of my coloring in Photoshop, so I don't have to go back to my vector files as often. As you can see, there's a lot that went into this. Come on. Clicking on the wrong folder. Then all the yellows I want to fill with white. And and then the blues behind. This is a pretty complicated text. The reason I did it outside of class is so in case it just took too long to do because it was so ambitious, I didn't want to take time away from helping you with your projects in class. But actually, it took about an hour of just focused work to get that logo typed right, without having to, narrate it. All right, so I have that. So now I can save that. That is the same thing. I'll call it test text, because this is just to show the black and white solution. Save as an EPS onto the desktop. Then I can close it. So that works, that shows you it, but this also, because the white is so important, this also will show it to you. Move that up above, let me place it. Remember, we want to keep it as a vector, but we can still transform it, and we can even skew it. And skew can do quite a bit. So that's kind of my black and white solution. And it can be helpful to keep them both in the same file, because then, let's say you want to do the poster in black and white. You've got these things just as well. All right, here, let me do this. So it's always a good idea to make sure it works for you in black and white. Before you go nuts with your color solutions, even when you know exactly what you're going for, as I did. Okay, so I'm going to make a new folder, call this black and white text. Move these both into it. And then I don't need these ones. All right, yes, that's what I want. Okay. I don't need this anymore. And then I move my vector text into this folder, my colored vector text. Okay, and now I have my spot illustration. So now, how do we make a background that we like? Well, we search for one. This is where compositing comes in. So it looks like there's sunbursts, lots of sunbursts, lots of kind of soft focus, lots of texture overlays. This kind of thing would work. So I'm going to look for that. Sunburst, texture overlay. Images. Because it's a poster, I should look for large sizes. And just see. But of course, because it's soft, it's not so important. This one's pretty good. It's a nice sunburst. I like this texture here. Pokemon cards always have this kind of texture to them, this wrinkle to them. That's just taking some random ones.